Welcome to Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. On this podcast, we journey through the devastating experience of the death of a child. Grief is seldom discussed openly in our culture, and the death of a child makes people feel even more uncomfortable. We approach the topic openly and honestly, speaking to people who have lost loved ones and experts who help care for them. Whether you are a parent experiencing loss or someone who wants to support another going through this tragedy, this podcast strives to offer hope and help.
Thank you so much, Sara, for agreeing to come on the Always Andy's Mom podcast today. I really am looking forward to talking to you.
Thank you so much, Marcy. It's an honor to be here today.
So just to give my listeners a little bit of background. So Sara wrote to me a couple of months ago now, and she works as a grief therapist now, but this all started because of her brother. So I want you to just start by talking to us about Jacob, just so we can kind of get to know who Jacob was as a brother and a little bit about you and your life together with him.
Yeah. So Jacob was vivacious. That is the only way you can describe him to still do him justice. He was the class clown since childhood, and just like larger than life personality, larger than life hair. He had this like frizzy afro, like just so thick, luscious brown curls. He often dressed quite outrageously. He would be known to wear like multiple prints or like sparkly things or sequin things and sheer things over top of non-sheer things. Like he just like, he didn't even beat to his own drum.
Yeah. Sounds perfect. It really does. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. He was great. And he had like such a big heart for others. Yeah. His peers always described him as like kind and conscientious and just like would do anything for anyone at any time.
Mm-hmm. Was he a big brother to you or a little brother?
He's my little brother. He's 4.5 years younger than me. So, yeah, for most of my life, we were cats and dogs. We could not stand each other. And
was it just the two of you?
It's just the two of us. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just the two of us. He's my only sibling. And we would drive each other up the wall and bug each other and pick on each other. But then so help you God, if you picked on either one of us, the other one was there to kick your butt to the curb.
Like, isn't that how it often works? Yeah.
Yeah. He's my brother. I'm the only one allowed to bully him. Thank you. Right.
Yeah. I could say all sorts of horrible things about my sister, but if you even dream about saying anything bad about her, yeah, you're going to pay for it. Uh-huh.
Exactly.
Very good. Very good. So as you got a little older, you got along a little better then?
Yes. So when I moved out of the house at 18, I took a gap year between high school and university. And from then on, we were like totally inseparable. It was like a flipped, like a switch was flipped. We would like message each other all the time and talk to each other on the phone. And yeah, it was just like a totally different chapter in our relationship. We were super, super close, even despite the age difference.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what happened then?
So I was in between my first and second year of my master's degree. He had just finished his second year of university. He wanted to be a pharmacist and like find cures for all of the terrible diseases in the world.
Oh, so not like a pharmacist at the local drugstore or something, but like working at a pharmaceutical company.
Yeah, like a pharmacologist.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I had planned this fabulous trip to go to Europe by myself. So I was backpacking through Europe and I got a call that I needed to come home, that he was in the hospital and that the doctors think I need to come back. So I immediately got on the next flight back to Toronto, where he was living and where he was in hospital. And by the time I got there, he was brain dead. So yeah, so I got back in time to like say goodbye to him, and I was there with him when they removed him from the life support machines, and
So what happened?
He had a heart attack at the age of 20.
Wow.
Yeah, he had other like health and mental health complications that I think kind of put too much stress on his cardiovascular system. And we do have a significant family history of cardiovascular disease.
Yeah, but what a shock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. 20-year-old little brothers don't die from heart attacks.
Die of a heart attack. No, they don't. Not when you're just in college, between your second and third year college. Oh my word. So that though changed kind of your whole life really from that point, didn't it?
Oh yeah. In like so many different ways.
Mm-hmm. So talk about that, because you had mentioned that you were taking this trip before you started your master's, and so you were in a master's program for social work. So you're going to be a social worker. And what had you thought kind of before this all happened with Jacob, and what changed then?
Yeah. So I really wanted to work in corrections. I wanted to work with people who were being cycled through the prison system. I had done some research and heard about like the recidivism rates and how like the prison industrial complex just keeps kind of bringing people back. And I was like, I want to end that. I want to end that cycle. So that was really what I had intended to when I had applied for my master's of social work. And yeah, I abandoned that almost immediately. I got through my second year of my master's degree in like a total fog and like relying on my peers to help me out because I had no energy. I had no memory. I had no short-term memory retention at all. And
it's crazy how that grief really gets you though. And you just can't think right.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, it was one of the reasons why I left practicing medicine for such a long time, because I was doing it for a while, but I really wasn't doing it well. I mean, I wasn't remembering names of medications. I just felt like, if I can't think of these things, what else am I missing? Right. And so that was kind of scaring me a little bit, that I felt like, and that's not everybody. Right. I mean, I feel like my husband probably took I'm sure he took amazing care of the patients he was putting to sleep. So I don't think anyone was in danger, and I don't think I was particularly dangerous. I just felt like I might be missing something here. It's really just when your mind is in such a fog.
Yeah. Oh, I felt that fog so heavy, Marcy. Like I said, like I had no short-term memory retention. I had no capacity to like be able to carry even like a normal conversation. And yeah, I got hit so hard by those side effects of grief that are lesser known. And they were certainly not known to me at that time. I had no idea what was happening to me. I thought I was like losing it.
Right. So did I.
Yeah. Turns out
I really thought if I tell people just how bad I'm feeling, they're going to put me in a psychiatric hospital. Right. Yeah. I mean, that's what I really honestly thought. And I remember the day that I said these things that I was feeling to my therapist. And I thought, what's she going to say? Is she going to say it's time to go in the psychiatric hospital on the south side of town here? I mean, I really thought that might be where she was going to go. And she instead came back with, yeah, that's normal. And I thought, oh my word, how can this be normal? How in the world can this be normal?
Yeah. And that was, so I very quickly was pointed out by friends that like, Sara, you need to go into therapy. Like, what are you doing with your life? And I was like, yeah, all right, I guess that makes sense. And I am so lucky. I found the most amazing grief therapist. And I honestly don't think that I would have been able to finish my master's degree if I hadn't met her. And yeah, exactly. As you said, she normalized all of those like super scary, super unknown or lesser known side effects of grief, and just like helped me do the work that I had to do within myself and within my life to integrate the loss of my brother.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then in my last couple of months of my master's degree, I did a mini thesis, and I was going to do it on corrections. And then I started it, and I emailed my professor. I was like, listen, I know we're halfway through this, but like, I need to change topics. I have to do it on young adult sibling loss. Like, I just have to. And she's like, yeah, do it. I'll give you an extension. I'll do whatever like needs to be done, but like, just do it. This project needs to be done. I agree with you. So through all this research, I realized that there is not a lot of research on young adult sibling loss. It is not an area that is well known. And the very little research that exists out there points that it is one of the most traumatic things that can happen to a young adult. It is more traumatic than losing a spouse. And from that moment on, I was like, this is what I need to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. I mean, I've said it before that the siblings are often said to be the forgotten grievers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That is just what it is. I mean, I'm sure I know the answer to this question. If I said to you, when people ask you, did they ask you, how are you doing? Or
No.
how's your mom doing?
Yeah.
Which question was more prevalent to you?
It was always, how are your parents doing?
Yes. How are your parents?
And I was like, I don't know, but I'm not doing good.
I know. Like, okay, yeah, my parents are doing terrible, but so am I. I'm doing terrible too. And I do think that 100%. And obviously this show very much is geared towards grieving parents. It really is. But we talk a lot about the other kids too, and how to care for them, and how to not forget about their grief, and how to let other people remember their grief too. Mm-hmm. And please don't just ask my son, how is your mom doing? How are your parents doing? Please ask him how he is, because this is a horrible thing. I mean, you know, my kids lost one of their best friends in the whole world, right? I mean, they did everything together.
Yeah. So, anyway. That's the thing about sibling loss, is you've lost a lifelong companion. Like right. You're supposed to have that person from infancy, from childhood, right up into your senior years.
Yeah.
They're supposed to be there for you for every stage in the life process. They're there to rant and rave about your parenting, about your parents. Mm-hmm. Like, you share secrets with your sibling that you share with no other person. You have this understanding with your sibling that you have with no other person. It is such a unique and special bond. There's no replacing it.
Mm-hmm. And you're right. I mean, you do know them far longer than your spouse, hopefully, right?
Yeah.
Because you've known them from the very, very beginning, from those first days, and you share so much together. It's just a devastating loss to lose them. Especially, I think, when you talked about this young adult stage, where oftentimes you don't have a spouse yet. Mm-hmm. You don't have someone that's right there in your life to kind of help share and get through that, when you don't have that partner for you to grieve with. Even though, you know, obviously if you did, you know, when something happens to my sibling, I would have Eric, my husband, to turn to. He won't grieve it the same way as me, mm-hmm. but I at least have him to turn to. But a young adult really doesn't have that either, oftentimes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I felt that alienation so deeply. Like, I didn't know that you could feel that lonely in this world. And I had a partner, and I had best friends, and I had, you know, other family members that I was super, super close with. And I, like, that loneliness just like broke my heart again and again and again.
Mm-hmm. And I've spoken to so many people too, that you don't want to end up burdening your parents with it too. So there is so much of this thing that you want to protect them, because mm-hmm. you know how badly they're hurting. And so you don't want to put more pain on them. It's a delicate balance though, because certainly your parents want to help you.
Yeah.
Oh. I talked to somebody not too long ago, and they were talking about how like their 3-year-old is trying to comfort them. I mean, it's just in you from little to try to help your parents and try to protect your parents. And that's ends up coming out so much.
Yeah.
So anyway, you changed your whole outlook. Suddenly you're writing a thesis on grief. And that's the way then your career ended up taking you.
Yeah. Yeah. So right out of university, I started with Gilda's Club in Barrie. And it was such a good opportunity for me because I got to really put my toes in the whole grief therapy puddle, as it were.
So for those people who aren't familiar with Gilda's Club, why don't you talk about that? It is international.
Yeah.
So yeah, why don't you talk about what Gilda's Club kind of is for people who don't know?
Totally. So Gilda's Club is part of the Cancer Support Community, which is an international network of individual not-for-profits providing free professional level services to folks impacted by cancer. That includes those who had the diagnosis as well as their family and friends, and then those who have lost a loved one to cancer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you started with them.
Yeah. And doing grief therapy was and still is probably one of my favorite parts of the job. And people give me weird looks. I'm like, yeah, I love talking about dead people and like grief. That's my jam. They're like, are you okay? I'm like, probably not, but
no,
I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing.
I know.
And then
I'm the same way. I think people think I'm crazy. On my days off from work, I talk to bereaved parents. I mean, that's weird. I know.
Yeah. Yeah. And then that wasn't still enough grief work for me. So I started working with a private practice offering more grief services to folks from just like a broader variety of backgrounds.
Mm-hmm. And you said you now have 3 jobs, right?
Yeah. I also work for another charity based in Toronto. They service folks who are impacted by eating disorders, and I run grief groups for them as well.
There you go. So you've got 3 grief jobs.
Yep.
Not even close to what you thought you'd be doing.
No, this is not what I had envisioned for my life before Jacob died at all. And I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Yeah. And how long ago now has it been since Jacob died?
4.5 years.
4.5 years. So I know for me, talking with other bereaved parents and doing the podcast and things like that has helped my grief tremendously. Actually, I feel like I help other people, but it's very helpful to me as well. Do you find that helpful in your own grief as well?
That's such a good question, Marcy. I think for me, I really had to decide that I was in a place in my grief where I could do the work for others while not being triggered. That was like absolute non-negotiable for me.
Right.
And I don't know that it helps my grief journey because I do try and keep them separate. I mean, like, obviously I bring the empathy to session because I know I have felt that pain, that deep, deep pain that non-grievers just can't even fathom. Like, it is just so deep and so beyond your wildest imagining of what hurt can be. Mm-hmm. And still, I feel that I am honoring Jacob with this work. Like I honestly feel like he's just smiling down on me and being like, yeah, like, good job. You're making some kind of difference.
That's my big sister. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I don't know that it's helping my grief journey, but I guess it does in a way.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's something that you can do with Jacob, right? That you can feel like he's there with you, kind of doing it with you and being your cheerleader. But you are right too, in that you can't be doing something that will trigger you. I mean, for me, I still have things at work that I can't do.
Yeah.
No, I mean, they have now a couple times scheduled for me to see somebody who had just been in a car accident to evaluate them, teenagers. I can't do that. I can't. That's too close, right? And it triggers me too much. And I'm not going to be able to really focus on them when I see their living teenager in the room who was just in a car accident. That's too much for me. So there are some things that are too close. And I think you have to separate that out. I mean, for a while, early on, I had trouble with every teenage boy. I had trouble seeing any sets of brothers in my practice. Like there would be many, many triggers. But as I've gotten further along in my grief journey, I can do those things now. But you have to kind of wait until you can do those things without being triggered.
Yeah.
Right. And I
absolutely.
couldn't start the podcast like right away. I mean, it was a year after Andy died when I started the podcast. Not that I don't still get triggered and I cry, because I do, but I'm not at the same place that I was in the beginning, because then I wouldn't have been able to do any of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's been my journey as well, is finding that balance between like bringing that meaning and bringing that legacy of Jacob into my career, while ensuring that A, I'm looking out for my own emotional health, and B, that I'm not putting myself in situations where I know I'm going to get triggered. Therefore, I'm not at my best for my client. So when I cry with them, sometimes I'll even let them know, like, hey, like, I'm not being triggered. I'm just sharing in your pain right now.
Yeah.
I'm just feeling it with you as we ride this wave.
And I'm sure they appreciate that. I mean, in general.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, I don't always believe that you need to have lived experience to be a good therapist, but I question whether you could truly be a good grief therapist without having gone through it.
Yeah, it's hard. That is a hard balance. I was talking to somebody else about that just recently, actually. And because there are moms I've talked to that won't see a therapist if they're not a bereaved person, because they just don't think they can do it. But my grief therapist isn't bereaved, and I think she's fantastic. I mean, she only sees bereaved moms. I think she's phenomenal at it, but it takes a special person.
Yeah.
And it does help, I think, if you have that experience. Not that I want people to have had that experience, but it is.
Yeah.
It's a delicate balance, isn't it? Because you don't want to wish it on somebody, for sure.
Yeah. No.
But yeah, once you have that shared experience, it's good. Good to be able to help each other out. So we were talking a little bit earlier about just kind of the different things that you do and how you do some group therapy and some individual therapy. And why don't you talk a little bit about what people might expect from this? Because, I have a lot of listeners who come on who are very early in their grief. Some of them have never seen a grief therapist, have not gone to a group, don't really know what to expect. And I think there are some misconceptions out there. And I just want you to really kind of tell people maybe what you would look for and what you can expect, and just let people know.
Yeah, totally. That's a great opener. So I think maybe the number one misconception I get about grief therapy is that I'm going to fix it for you, or make the pain go away, or tell you what to do to feel better.
Yes. Although some people want that, I think,
Yeah. Well, yeah. Like people coming to me asking me that, but I'm like,
fix me.
I can't do that for you. That's not my role here today. And I think that's maybe the hardest part about grief work, as opposed to other types of therapy, where like if you're working with someone with anxiety, you're like, here's some skills, here's some tools. We are going to try and fix this problem together and make you feel better and alleviate that pain. With grief, that is not the end goal. The only thing that a grief therapist can do really is just sit with you and just witness it and be there for you and feel the feelings with you. Because grief it's not something that can be fixed, nor would I want to fix it. If I was taking away someone's grief, it would mean that they don't love that person as much as they do, that they don't miss that person as much as they do, that they don't value the relationship as much as they do. Like, I think,
so what would you say the goal is then?
The goal is to be able to help them process it. Sometimes people are just so afraid of the pain that they just can't let it come out.
Mhm.
So giving them that safe space where they feel supported, where they feel like they can, ride that wave of grief or emotion or pain or whatever language makes sense to them. Sometimes it's just me sitting, watching them cry and they feel safer knowing that someone's there. Or maybe it's me, walking them through like, hey, this is going to hurt. And, we're going to come out of this. We're going to get you a drink of water. We're going to put a blanket over your lap and we're going to get through it together. Another thing I do with folks is help them integrate the loss. So we want to take that grief in a way that they can carry it forward with them without it impeding them, right? Like in early grief, obviously, we're not going to be functional humans.
Right.
And I would never expect that of any griever. But, at some point, we want to find a way to pick up that grief and just carry it with us in the rest of our life. And in a really beautiful way that honors who that person is and was and keeps them with you.
Well, and that's what you do in your work, right? That's exactly what you've done with your work. You feel like, Jacob's your little cheerleader there beside you going, that's my sister, she's doing awesome. And I feel like with a podcast, Andy's like up in heaven going, look at my mom. Isn't my mom great? So that because they are very much a part of what we're doing, but then in a positive way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're trying to find other people, obviously other people aren't going to do that. I mean, not everyone ends up doing something in their life based around grief. I mean, we're kind of weird. We'll just put that out there. And for the majority of people, it's not going to be that obvious. But to be able to integrate little pieces, I think is huge.
Yeah. And it's such a personalized journey, right? Like it looks different for every single person. On how they can carry that person and that relationship and that loss with them for the rest of their lives in a way that, still aligns with their visions and what their goals are for a happy, healthy human in this world.
I mean, I just think about different little things that people do. And, sometimes people just like buying little gift cards and bringing them to the children's hospital and having something because that's just a little something they do. But that is integrating it, right? That is integrating your grief into your life. And that every once in a while, I buy $5 Starbucks gift cards or Tim Hortons or whatever, and bring it into the hospital for someone to be able to get a good cup of coffee and a donut. But that is a way of integrating. So it doesn't have to be big. They can be really small little things.
It can
or
be
just
so
keeping your child's life or your siblings' life alive in the eyes of the rest of your family, right? Making them still, their presence still be felt.
Yeah. Yeah. Or even something as simple as like, for me, I had such an identity crisis of like, am I still a sister?
Yeah.
And a big part of integrating my loss was redefining my sisterhood and my relationship as a sibling. So even if it's just, a parent, like either claiming that they're a parent or claiming that their child is dead or whatever language makes sense for them, but for them to redefine their own identity after that loss, I see integration that way too. And again, it's such a personal journey and it takes time.
Yeah, for sure. I think about that too. I had big revelation one day as to, my definition of who I define myself as. And I was like, I'm a caregiver. That's what I do. And how can I do that moving forward? And it's not going to look the same as it has in the past, but that's always been me. And that is still me. So I think just looking at yourself in that way and trying to figure that out can be helpful. And that is a beautiful thing a therapist can help you do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I know, just thinking back to my own therapy journey too, I definitely did not think I was ever going to practice pediatrics again. I mean, there was certainly a time in my life like that's just not happening. And I remember my therapist said, we can get you there. If you want to be there, we can get you there. She also didn't say I had to.
Yeah.
Right? That was also very key and very important, because I had other people in my life say, oh, you will. And then I had another person in my life say, well, it kind of sounds like you won't. But the perfect thing was, if you want to, we can get you there. I know we can. Yeah. And to have someone, a grief therapist, there to say, we can get you wherever you want to be, was so beautiful.
Yeah, that's so key in grief work, is making room for those redefinitions, not putting permanence on anything. Like, just because you take a leave of absence for a year doesn't mean that you're never returning to that job. It also doesn't mean that you have to return to that job. Like, removing those sort of self-perceived limitations. Yeah, those self-perceived permanent decisions, and recognizing that, like, listen, we're just doing the best that we can in this moment, in this grief. And
I think to somebody else, I think back to a dad I talked to a long time ago now, who said he's just always been afraid to cry because he just never thought he'd stop. So he never cried because I'm just afraid I won't stop. So that is a beautiful thing that I thought with my therapist as well, is when I got there, we would have kind of visualization exercises where I would visualize my box of grief that I was opening and really experiencing. But at the end of the session, she would kind of say, okay, now let's try to put some of that back in the box. Right. And so I wasn't feeling like I was leaving so devastated and right. I wasn't like just the grief just pouring out of me when I walked out the door. Yeah. She also would get me back to a point where I can walk out of the door now. Right. And I would feel drained. There's no question. Right. You have a big therapy session, you feel drained.
Yeah.
But yet you can now move forward. It's not like drained to the point where I can't function the rest of the day.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, really good for a therapist to be able to do too, to be able to help you let it out and then help you know that it's okay to put it back away for a little bit and have periods of time where I'm going to take the grief out and I'm going to work on it now. And now I'm going to put it back up on the shelf. And I'm not going to work on it right now because it's too hard to work on it every moment of every day. You can't.
Oh, yeah. No. And that's such another important part of grief work too, is helping clients find that balance, because exactly as you said, if we engaged with that grief, that raw pain every second of every day, I honestly don't know if it's like survivable.
No, like I don't know that I would be able to get out of bed.
No.
Right? I don't know. Could I get out of bed? Could I take care of the rest of my family? Could I, drive a car? Could I do anything really? Cook a meal? Yes. Probably not. If I'm feeling it all, because some people feel like I need to feel it. I need to feel this bad every second. This horrible thing has happened. I should feel this bad every second. I mean, I had those thoughts.
Yeah, totally. Right. Like, oh, hey, I'm eating food. Oh, wait, that makes me a bad sister. I'm supposed to be in mourning. I'm supposed to be grieving. So yeah.
Right. Or if you laugh, heaven forbid.
Heaven forbid you laugh. Oh my God. Yeah. So working with clients to know that, like, grief is an experience. It is not an emotion. You can be eating.
Oh, I love that.
You can be laughing. You can be sharing jokes with people, and you are still grieving. You are still a bereaved person. Nothing is going to take that grief away from you. Not eating, not laughing, not going back to your job, not, getting remarried after the loss of a spouse. Grief is a membership card. It's unfortunately for life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you're in this club 24/7 until your time on this earth is done. So reminding people, like, hey, eat some food, get some calories, and you are still grieving. You are still doing the good, heavy work of grieving as you eat that meal.
Yes. And you are going to have it forever and it's going to be with you forever, but it doesn't always have to feel as heavy as it does right then.
Yes, exactly.
So yeah, I do want to mention that. I mean, I feel like initially the grief is like a gigantic boulder that you're like dragging because you can barely move.
Yeah, it
and
takes all your energy and all your effort.
It takes every bit of you to even get it to budge. And honestly, 3 years out, it's still a really heavy rock that I carry around with me every day. I mean, I've been told that someday it's going to feel more like a rock that's in my pocket that pokes at me every once in a while, but doesn't always hurt. I'm not quite there yet, honestly. It's still a pretty darn heavy rock that I'm using quite a bit of energy to carry. I'm not like dragging it behind me, but it's still a big portion of my life. But it is changing, and it does not feel the same as it did at the beginning.
Yeah. Another one of my favorite metaphors was actually given to me by my grief therapist. And she said, imagine your life as like a circle. That's your whole life from infancy to this day. It's like a circle that's this big. And then when Jacob died, that circle was filled with a black hole of grief. There was like no room for anything else. Just everything was grief all the time, just pain and anguish. And rather than that, I called it grief hole.
Yeah.
Rather than it getting smaller, because in my early days of grief, I was like, I don't want it to get smaller.
No.
I don't want to stop loving him and missing him this much ever. She's like, it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to get smaller. Instead, what happens as we age, we get rings around the circle.
Yeah.
Because we're getting older and our life is getting bigger. So as we move through life, we keep that grief void, but we build these rings around it that bring more balance while still having that grief with us that we can carry and treasure and integrate and engage with if we feel like we need to.
I like how you say engage with too, because that's important to know that it's okay to engage with your grief at some point and then not at others. And that can be a constant thing that you're doing, and that you're 25 years out and you can still engage with your grief sometimes. It's not like there's some sort of time limit, which I think the general public sort of thinks there is. You know, whether it's a year or it's 6 months or it's whatever it is, there's a time. And once the time is up, the time that they think is appropriate, you should not feel it anymore and certainly not engage with it anymore. It's done. It's the past.
Yeah. I always say like grief is it's not something we can get over. It's not a door that you can close behind you because it's not a one-time event. Right? Like I lose Jacob over and over. Just a couple of days, it would have been his 25th birthday. I lost him again that day.
Yeah.
I'm going to lose him when, he should have been getting married and having kids and I would have been an aunt. I lose him, every big family get together when I see all my cousins with their siblings and I'm sticking out like the sore thumb without my sibling here with me. It's not something that we get over. It's not something that ever stops happening to us. But again, it's just about that integration and giving yourself time and space and compassion to build some balance in your life so that grief isn't the only key player in your emotional system.
Yeah. Yeah. Just so that you're feeling more. I just love how you said that grief is not an emotion. It's an experience. I mean, I feel like that should be written in like bold letters on the top of everybody's mirror, or I don't know, maybe on my own forehead so that people don't think that it's just done. You're just done with it at a certain point, or that I'm not grieving today. Like I'm sad today. I'm angry today. I'm grieving today, but I'm not grieving tomorrow. Nope. It's not like that at all. Well, we've talked a lot, I think, about what individual therapy can do. Can you talk about what you think the role of kind of group therapy can be for people?
Yeah, I love doing group therapy. Like that is probably my all-time favorite work to do. even though I love my individual clients so much. So one of the huge benefits of group therapy is it decreases the isolation and alienation that so many folks feel in grief, right? Especially in a society where we are so ill prepared for the realities of grief and the bereavement process. I hear so many people think like, I must be going crazy, or I'm doing this wrong, or is this what I'm supposed to be feeling right now? And I mean, there's no right or wrong way to grieve, but getting together with folks who have similar experiences can just be such a load off your shoulders to be like, oh my God, someone else feels that way too. Hallelujah. I'm not, and I haven't completely lost it.
Right. I remember my grief support group, somebody saying that she couldn't follow a recipe to like cook. And I thought, oh, good. I mean, it was just really a huge relief to know that somebody else's mind seemed that foggy that they couldn't follow a recipe. So
yes, totally. Yeah. So I think that's one of the biggest benefits of it. I mean, oftentimes groups are either free or cost effective. So for folks who don't have insurance, it's a great option as well. And yeah, just that opportunity to build brotherhood and sisterhood and connection with fellow grievers there's just something extra therapeutic about it.
Mm-hmm. I know it had been so helpful to me. I mean, I've talked about this before. Like when I first started, I was just we were 3 weeks into our grief journey. And I just showed up because I didn't know what else to do. And I thought, okay, let's try a group. I don't know. And at first I really didn't even want to be there, to be honest, because I felt like I was in so much shock and disbelief that this was actually happening. I just my mind kept saying to myself, you don't belong here. You're not one of these people. You know what I mean? It just didn't like feel real enough. But as time went on, it was just so nice to, like you said, to just not feel as alone in it, to just to know that these people were feeling the same thing. And I think of my friend Megan and John came, and Megan and John lost their daughter Willow 2 days before Andy died. And I just felt such a bond to them because I knew they were experiencing the exact same thing. I mean, we were 2 days different in our grief journey. And so to be able to know that every week when I showed up, they were going to be there too, it just made you not feel alone.
Yeah.
And I think too, is several months in, we'd done a few sessions. I mean, we ended up going to Megan and John's house with another couple who lost their son a few months before us. And we had a game night, and it was great because I really felt like I could laugh and have fun with these people. And we love playing board games. I mean, we love it. But it was weird after Andy died. It felt like we couldn't really do it anymore. It just seemed wrong somehow to go somewhere and laugh with other people. And I think it was this fear that they would judge me and think that I'm not really grieving, or I didn't really miss him. Or what if by some chance something would trigger me and I would start crying, then they would feel weird and it would spoil everything. And I had all of these crazy thoughts, right? I was everything all over it. And I knew that when I went to Megan and John's house, it didn't matter. It did not matter at all. If I cried, it's fine. If I laughed, it was fine. I was just in an environment with people who I didn't have to pretend at all. And that may be the best thing about a grief support group, because I've talked to a lot of bereaved people now, and we do a lot of pretending.
Oh yeah.
You do a lot of pretending.
And it's
you
so
are
exhausting.
Okay, and you smile and you pretend all the time. And to be able to go somewhere, even if it's for an hour and a half once a week, and no, you don't have to pretend for that whole time. Wow. And it's pretty powerful.
Yeah. And I love that you brought up laughter, because I think maybe that's another big conception about grief therapy or grief groups, especially, it's just, other people are going to be crying and I cry enough and I don't need to listen to other people crying. Like, yeah, there's oftentimes tears, but honestly, I think there's more laughter than tears.
I think there's no question. There's no question. I mean, I'm doing a virtual grief support group now that I'm facilitating. I think we laugh more than we cry.
Oh,
I mean, there are weeks. There are weeks when we probably cry more than we laugh, but there are definitely weeks when we laugh more than we cry. I mean,
totally.
Sure. Yeah. And again, no guilt about it.
Yeah.
No one's feeling guilty about laughing instead of crying, because we're all laughing because we all know that everybody in that room or in that virtual room that we're in knows that we're not grieving just because we're laughing.
Mm-hmm.
That we're not somehow over it or being disrespectful or anything.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, yeah, I think that is one of the best things about the support groups. So they definitely do different things for sure. And I feel like they each have really a great place in your grief journey. And I would urge people not to try to just pick one and think that you just have to do one and not the other. I mean, you don't have to do both, but I do think they do different things for people.
Yeah, definitely. And different styles too, right? So you were asking me earlier, like what to look for in a grief therapist or in a grief group. And that's kind of individualized too. It depends on what works for you. Like for me, I needed like a social worker who was going to like therapize me and was going to be clinical about it. That's just my style of accessing services. Some people don't like that. They only want peer support, right? So there's so many different groups out there. Some of them are through religious affiliation. So if that's something important to you, look for that. If you know that you like a bit more of like a professional clinical approach, look for a licensed mental health professional as your therapist. If you know that you don't like that approach and you only want to connect with other grievers, look for something that's totally just peer-based, right? So I mean, it's like every grief journey is unique, right? So what's going to work for you is unique as well. So to know that there are so many different types of grief groups and so many different types of group facilitators to honor what works for you and not be too discouraged if the first one doesn't work out, especially if you're looking for an individual therapist. I always say therapy is like online dating. You got to go on a few first dates before you find that magical connection.
Yes. You are so right there. You don't even know how many times I talk to patients about that, teenagers especially.
Yeah.
If you not like your therapist, that does not mean you do not like therapy.
Yeah.
That means you need a new therapist.
Yeah.
I talk to them all the time. I've said this on the show that when my mother died, I saw a therapist at my college and the therapist wanted me to draw, and I hate drawing. I just hate it. And it was not at all helpful to me. It's like stressful to me that she wanted me to draw. And when I left, every week I left, I really honestly felt worse than when I got there. That is not what's supposed to happen. That does not mean she was not a lovely therapist for someone else. I'm sure she was. And honestly, she probably didn't have to deal with grief that much. I mean, you talked about this too before we started recording, that not every therapist is a good grief therapist. So when you were a college age student and they just put you into the counseling center, that there very well maybe no one at that counseling center who is good at dealing with grief, because it's not a common topic that college age kids have to deal with.
It's not. Right? I didn't even learn anything about grief therapy in my entire master's degree. It's something that I had to seek out and take postgraduate courses in. So yeah, I mean, just like doctors, right? Like you wouldn't go to your neighbor who's an oncologist to look at the mole on your back. Like, no, you'd go to a dermatologist. Same thing. You wouldn't go to the dermatologist to look at your heart. You go to a cardiologist. All therapists have specializations. I would say if a therapist has like 100 different specializations on their website, to me, that's a huge red flag.
Me too.
That is not.
I have asked, because I've been in a medical director role and I've talked to therapists and I've asked them, what are you good at? And when they tell me, oh, I can do anything, I'm like, you know what? Then I don't want it. I don't want you to do anything. because
Mhm.
I want you to tell me the about 5 things that you feel like you're really good at. Because
Yeah.
that's, I think, what you should be as a therapist. You should be good at a few things, a handful of things that you're just good at. And that's what you focus on. And the other stuff someone else can do. I mean, if you
Yeah.
feel like you have this pressure to do everything, then you're probably not doing anything well.
Yeah, I agree. And like I said, like there's so many different types of therapy. There's so many types of therapeutic modalities and interventions that there's just no way you can know all of them. Like we learn
No.
a couple in school, and then it's on you as a professional to continue your professional development journey and keep doing postgraduate education and courses and certifications and all that kind of stuff. So it is not
And then
possible to
and
be.
then you get your kind of niche that you feel like
Yeah.
what you're good at. I mean, even in pediatrics, I do I do a lot of stuff with migraine headaches. Like I am the migraine
Mm.
headache person of our, dozen people in our pediatrics practice. When someone has trouble with someone with headaches, who do they turn to? They turn to me. I mean, there are other people that we turn to for different things. And that is in a specialty that already in a specialty, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
it's like that with everything. I mean, I feel like I was laughed too, because every once in a while my husband comes home and that someone will ask him some sort of medical question about pediatrics because he's married to me. I mean, he did not learn pediatrics from osmosis from me. He's an anesthesiologist. He does not know anything about pediatrics. I
Yeah.
mean, except the little bits that he might have picked up, and not enough, right? So,
Yeah.
so anyway, it's the same kind of stuff. You just have to find that person, find that perfect person. And
Mhm.
in my college experience, I ended up not going through the counseling center. I went through one of the campus ministers, and she was beautiful and really helpful and really helped me tremendously with my grief. And every week when I left her, I felt better. And that's what you should do. If you don't
Yeah.
feel like a weight off, I mean, it may be draining, but you should feel a little lighter, right? After you have had sessions with your therapist, it should take
Yeah.
some of that weight off.
Yeah, I generally agree. The only caveat I would say is if someone is like a little bit farther along in the grieving process, sometimes when we see them for the first time, things get worse before they get better.
Oh, sure,
Like if
sure.
if they've not engaged with that grief very much, that those big, heavy, painful emotions, it's gonna feel
And I actually do
terrible.
tell kids too. When I tell kids, I tell them they have to go 6 times before they can quit. So
Yeah.
I mean, that is a thing that I do too, because I do not let them quit after one, because you are right. You are getting into some stuff, whether it's their grief, whether it's anxiety, depression, no matter what it is, you have to get into it and get into a
Mhm.
relationship. So that's my rule, is the 6-time rule. You go
I
6
love
times.
that
And if you
rule.
don't like them after 6 times, I will find you someone else. But if you don't give me the 6 times, that's really not trying. So
Mhm.
I hope that you can get somebody feeling comfortable. And so they're starting to feel a little better after they see you after 6 times. Does that seem like a reasonable?
Oh yeah, I think that's definitely reasonable.
Okay, we'll go with that then. So any of you starting therapy, you give it 6 times,
Yeah.
according to both Sara and me now. So. Well, is there anything else you feel like you want to share with the audience as kind of parting words before we wrap up here?
The only other thing I mean, we touched on it a little bit, but like how parents can support their
Yes.
kids when there's been another loss, right? And it is so tricky. And I do a lot of work with adults, like when there's an adult surviving child with their maybe like middle aged or more towards a senior parent.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the work that I do in those circumstances are really about very clearly explaining your individual grief needs to each other
Mm-hmm.
and finding ways where you can support each other without violating your own bereavement needs.
That's good. Communication is so, so important.
Yeah, so important.
Yeah, because sometimes your needs they just don't quite fit
Hmm.
perfectly. So you need to
Hmm.
find a way to make them fit as well as you can. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that's a good piece of
exactly.
advice for us all to remember. Well, thank you so much, Sara, for sharing Jacob with us and sharing your vast knowledge of grief and grief therapy. I think it will be super helpful to all of my listeners to be able to just learn from what to expect.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Marcy. It's been a joy sharing Jacob with you. And yeah, I'm excited to keep listening to your amazing podcast.
Oh, well, thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. Please subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast player. We are always looking for new show ideas. If you'd like to be a guest, know someone who'd be a great guest, or have a show idea, please email us at marcy@andysmom.com. Be sure to visit the webpage, andysmom.com, for more content, including Marcy's blog. There you can also sign up to receive updates via email. Together, let's work to inspire hope, one day at a time.